Imagine a Viking rowing 30 miles before breakfast, then hauling his own longship out of the water like it weighs nothing. Now, imagine a modern man, gym membership and a personal best bench press, trying to keep up. He doesn't make it past the rowing. His grip gone in 20 minutes, with his shoulders locked by the hour mark, while the Viking is already unloading cargo, not even breathing hard. That's the contradiction nobody wants to look at. Men train harder today than almost any generation in history, and most of that training collapses the second it's tested outside a gym. Because modern training is built for exactly one purpose, a strength that impresses a mirror. The Vikings trained for the opposite. Strength that held, through cold, through hours, through whatever the day actually demanded, with nobody checking if they were ready first. So what did they do differently? It wasn't a program. It was a way of living that modern training quietly removed. Here are 6 of those habits, the real ones, backed by the sagas and the science. And the 6th one matters more than the rest, because it explains something most men never figure out: why doing everything right, training hard, eating clean, sleeping little, can still leave you weaker and more burnt out than the year before. Now, let's start with the first habit. They never trained one skill. A Norse man wasn't trained to be good at one thing. The sagas call these skills íþróttir, and a free man was judged publicly on how many he'd mastered, the way we'd judge a resume today. Swimming, sometimes for miles, in fjord water cold enough to stop a modern athlete's heart. Wrestling, Glíma, stone lifting, archery, javelin, natleika, a brutal stick-and-ball game closer to hockey than any modern warm-up, with sagas casually mentioning broken bones as part of the entertainment. Compare that to a modern gym split, the same 3 lifts, the same 6 machines, for years. Sports science has quietly confirmed what the sagas assumed. NBA players who only played one sport in high school miss significantly more games to injury over their careers than the ones who played several. Studies on NFL athletes find the same pattern. Early specializers see more major injuries and shorter careers. A body only ever asked to move one way breaks the first time life asks it to move a different one. You don't need to become a wrestler to steal this one. You need one day a week that has nothing to do with your usual split: a swim, a grappling class, a hike with weight on your back. One day where your body has to solve a different problem. That single habit does more for long-term durability than another chest day ever will. Which brings us to the second habit. Not what they trained, but what they trained with. The boulders scattered across Iceland's black beaches aren't decoration. At Djúpalónsandur, 4 stones still sit on the sand, worn smooth by hands, and for centuries lifting the 154-kilogram fullstokkur, full strength, off the ground and onto a ledge was the test to earn a place on a fishing crew. Fail, and you didn't row that season. No barbell, no fixed path, just an awkward, shifting mass that fought you differently on every single attempt. In 2009, a study in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research put athletes through a yoke walk, an unstable load carried across the shoulders, shifting with every step instead of locked to a bar path, and measured something strange. Their hips produced over double the force they hit on a controlled, isolated strength test. The body doesn't just lift more under an unpredictable load. It recruits reserves a fixed barbell never asks for, because a barbell never has to be trusted, only lifted. Steal it by swapping one barbell session a week for something asymmetrical: a sandbag, a heavy duffel bag, an awkward rock if you can find one. Carry it, lift it, wrestle it into place. 10 minutes of that teaches your body to stabilize under real, chaotic load in a way a bar path never will. The third habit isn't about how much they lifted. It's about how long they had to keep going. A Viking longship crossing open water wasn't roaded for 45 minutes with a 5-minute rest between sets. It was roaded for 10, 12, 16 hours straight, in shifts, in freezing spray, with no substitute waiting on a bench and no whistle to call a break. That's a nervous system being taught a completely different lesson. Keep producing force long after the tank should be empty, because the alternative is drifting. Set and rest training builds one kind of adaptation. Continuous output. Under fatigue builds another, the kind sports scientists call work capacity. It doesn't show up on a 1-rep max in a quiet gym. It shows up 9 hours into a day that refuses to end. Once a week, steal it by replacing a rest-heavy session with continuous work, a long ruck, a 30-minute circuit with almost no rest, a hard ride with no coasting. It's uncomfortable in a completely different way than lifting, and that discomfort is exactly the gap most modern programs leave open. The fourth habit is about the tools themselves, because Vikings trained with gear heavier than anything the real task ever asked for. A treaty written in Scandinavia not long after the Viking Age survives today, and it instructs warriors to train with weapons heavier than the ones they'd actually fight with a partner, and with water on hand. Heavier in practice, lighter and faster when it mattered. It's a training principle sports scientists still use today. Baseball hitters train with bats 10 to 20% heavier than game weight because it recruits more motor units and more fast-twitch fiber, priming the nervous system so the real, lighter tool suddenly feels effortless in comparison. The Norse found the same trick with an axe, 1,000 years early. Steal it by training the heavier version of your task on purpose. A slightly thicker bar, a weighted vest for your normal walk, a heavier bag for your normal carry. Then do the real thing right after. It will feel lighter than it has any right to. This is exactly the kind of forgotten training principle the art of living like a man is built around. The guide combines habits like this one, from the Vikings and other ancient cultures, with the modern science behind why they worked. The link's in the description if you want the full system. The fifth habit has nothing to do with equipment at all. It's about who was in the room. Combat training wasn't solo. Wrestling wasn't solo. Glíma bouts were fought in front of entire villages at the Thing assemblies, judged, corrected, remembered by name for years afterward. There was no version of Viking training where a man trained alone, in silence, with nobody watching his form. A partner catches the mistake you can't see in your own technique. A partner is also, quite literally, the difference between an injury and a near miss. Steal it by finding one. Recurring training partner, even just for a single session a week. Someone who watches your form, pushes resistance you can't add yourself, and notices when something's off before it becomes an injury. Which brings us to the sixth habit, the one modern men get most backwards. We've been taught that more is always better. More training days, more restriction, more cardio stacked on more protein, stacked on less sleep. We think we're building resilience. Most of the time, we're just raising our baseline stress and never lowering it again. The Vikings didn't live like that. Their year had teeth in it. The raiding season, the rowing, the brutal physical demand of a Scandinavian summer, and then it had an off switch that nobody was allowed to skip. Winter halls, packed with smoke and bodies, feast days, storytelling by the fire that could run half the night, for no reason except that it felt good to sit still. Even the Old Norse word for Saturday, laugardaga, means washing day, a day built into the week itself for nothing but rest and bathing, long before anyone had a science explaining why. Recovery wasn't a reward you earned after enough suffering. It was scheduled, the same way the hard days were. Sports medicine has a name for what happens when that cycle disappears. It's called overtraining syndrome, and the strange part is it isn't caused by training too hard. It's caused by never truly stopping. Studies on overtrained athletes find their stress hormone system stops responding properly. Cortisol should spike hard under real stress and drop fast once it's over. Sharp and clean, like a switch. In an overtrained body, that spike flattens out. The system stops reacting at all, because it's never once been allowed to reset. So high stress isn't the enemy. Stress with no exit is. The Vikings hit hard, then they genuinely stopped, and that cycle is exactly what kept them able to hit hard again. Steal it by putting a reel-off switch on your calendar. Not just a rest day between workouts, a full week every few months with nothing scheduled, no tracking, no restriction. It will feel like losing progress. It's actually the only thing that lets the 6 habits before it keep working instead of quietly burning you out. Which brings it back to that stone on the beach at Jupalon Sandur. Nobody lifted full stakur for a photo. There was no mirror on that beach. There was a boat, a crew, and one real question. Can this man pull his weight when the sea decides to test him? The lift wasn't the point. What the lift proved was the point. That's the whole difference. A 2015 study in The Lancet followed nearly 140,000 people across 17 countries and found that grip and functional strength tested against a real task, predicted how long people lived better than blood pressure did. Strength tested against a mirror predicted nothing at all. A mirror has never once asked a man to prove anything. So picture that morning again. The Viking, 30 miles into a row, then hauling a longship up a beach like it's furniture, still moving after sunset. The modern man, slumped over an oar an hour in, optimized and done for the day. Neither man is weak, but only one of them trained for a day that might actually test him. You don't need a longship or a stone on an Icelandic beach to start. You need training that resembles life again. Varied, heavy, unpredictable, done with someone else, cycled hard, and then genuinely rested. Build that, and the mirror stops being the point. What you can actually hold becomes the point. The Viking way exists to recover what modern training quietly deleted. If this changed how you train, you already know what to do.